Hello, and welcome back to the Beyond Paranormal Investigations podcast. I'll be your host, Nathan Smith. Now, today we have a very special guest with us, Zach Williams. Are you there, Zach? Alright, Zach, go ahead and tell us your story, buddy.
Alright, my name is Zach Williams. I'm 22 years old. Here recently, a few years ago, had an encounter with what I'd like to call a dark spirit. It may have been a dark spirit, it may have been a demon, I don't know exactly what this supernatural occurrence was, but here not too long ago in Troy, my friend Dakota, back whenever he used to live with his parents, his family, I suppose, is highly spiritual. They're kind of like my mom and myself. They've always had either the ability to see the supernatural or they've had a supernatural occurrence often happening in their household. Well, here a few years back, he had told to me a lot about the spirit that was keeping him awake at night and haunting him, and it looked like a blue spirit with a hat, according to him, and it had gotten so bad to the point at his house where it was opening his doors, and at one point caused his closet door to just completely fall off of its hinges. And after a while, they tried everything. They hung up crosses over doorways and set holy water up in their house, but nothing really affected it. So after a while, he got tired of it and wanted to spend it at my house. So he spent about 3 days at my house because I knew he wanted to get away from things for a while. So he thought he had gotten away from the spirit, and wouldn't you know it, the spirit actually followed him to my house. Now, I know there are I guess, a common misconception about a being of the supernatural is that they only haunt one place, and at the time, for a while, I thought that was true myself, that a spirit lingered somewhere for a reason. Well, I guess this one just fed off of his torment or depression or something, because I know he was going through a lot of tough times when this had taken place. But came over to my house to chill for a while, but turns out it followed him here, and I ended up having to deal with this myself as well. And I had first noticed it only 30 minutes after he had gotten here. Me and him were at my house home alone, and we were standing in my hallway. And I told him something was standing behind him, and the spirit that he had described I'd seen with my own eyes. It looked like a shadow with a blue hat on. And as soon as I pointed to it and he turned around, it was gone. But on his way over here, he had talked to me about wanting to potentially get it on camera or whatever. So he was actually talking to me with his phone out in the hallway. And he has ghost tracking material on his phone. So he had the negatives turned on his phone while he was talking to me. And luck was with us. Whenever I pointed to it and he turned down and it vanished, he had snapped a picture on his phone. And I'll have a picture sent to Nathan as soon as I can get the picture from my friend. But as soon as he turned down and snapped the picture, it looked like the dark spirit was trying to flee. And there was a blue orb behind my refrigerator where he wasn't really the form of a dark blue spirit with a hat on anymore, but the dark blue spirit remained, and it looked like he was attempting to hide behind my refrigerator for some reason. But the natural occurrence to report here is that even after he left, that spirit did not follow him back home, but continued to haunt me for about a week until it finally disappeared. I'm not really a negative person, and no one in my house is really negative. So if that spirit truly was feeding off of negativity, it wasn't getting any source from my house. So I don't know where it went, but it eventually passed on by its own standard.
Wow. Are you familiar with the Hat Man?
No, I'm not.
If you go online and look up the Hat Man,
Okay.
there's a lot of appearances that you'll see of people reporting seeing a man, a shadow man, in a hat. And there was one story that I'd heard of a man in the military. He was in his bunker, I guess you could say, and no, it was barracks. And he got up one morning and went to the bathroom and was washing his face. And whenever he looked up in the mirror, he saw a man in the hat behind him. They said he thought it was weird because there was some guy, a civilian, in the military base. So he's like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" He said, "My name is Scratch." If you look up the name Old Scratch, it's an old European word for the devil. That's what they used to call him.
Oh, wow.
Some people report him as being a shadow person, and some report him as being a solid human.
It looked about as close to a human whenever he was in his natural form, I guess you could say. But he was a blue human figure with a hat.
That's really interesting. You said you had another story for us too, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. What's this other story you have for us?
Well, about back whenever I was in 8th grade, something was going on at home. I was at school when this happened to start off with, but turns out my grandmother had died that day, so I'd come home kind of late from school. It was probably 4 p.m. around the time I got home. Anyway, it's not really important since we were kind of a family where our grandmother was kind of the whole reason our family actually got along, and after she died, my family kind of branched off. Like my aunts and uncles didn't associate with us much anymore, but our immediate family life was fine. But they say the spirit may linger for different reasons. I don't know exactly how my grandmother decided to inhabit my house for 2 years, but I know after she passed away, her cause of death was unknown. Her spirit decided to linger here for a couple of years, and she didn't do anything malevolent to our house. She would kind of watch over us in our sleep, and she would perform actions she would normally perform whenever she was alive. The last 3 years she was alive, she had lived in my house, and I was the one who took care of her. And during the night, there would be a white spirit with a whitish gown on that she would always wear. She would always wear this white gown with pink decorations, and she would just walk across the hallway and walk back and forth, and sometimes she would just stop in my doorway to look at me and just stop in my doorway to look at my mom and dad. My dad hasn't always been a person to see spirits. He doesn't think it's silly. He knows we see what we see, but it was just me and my mom that was able to see her and watch her actions, but it wasn't so much of a haunting as it was having an extra person who wasn't really there just living in our house for about 2 years. And I feel like she may have died prematurely, and she felt like she wanted to make sure me and my mom were alright. I'm not sure, to be completely honest, but that's all she would do for 2 years. She would go back and forth between what is currently my room, which used to be her room, and the kitchen, 24/7. And she would sometimes peer into the rooms at night to watch me sleep or my mom sleep, and sometimes I would wake up and see her and she would just completely vanish. But that's all there is to the second story.
Wow. Did you ever try to contact her in any way? Like speak to her or anything?
Okay, funny story about that. The only two people that would make contact with her or would interact with her were my nephew whenever he was 5 years old and my niece whenever she was 3 years old. And they say spirits are more likely to make contact with a child, and I think this is a witness from my own niece and nephew that the one the two people that she would interact with on occasion, if she would ever make an interaction with anyone directly, would be my niece and nephew.
I have heard things like that children can see things that we can't. It's very interesting. Um, you said you had potentially a third one for us. Are you prepared to tell that one now, or would you like to wait on that?
I can tell it now. It's short. I will gather up a few more occurrences for I'll gather up a few more occurrences later, but I'll go ahead and tell the third story because it's really short.
All right.
Now, surprisingly enough, the third story has to do with grandmother. Like, I don't have any living elder generations anymore. All of my grandparents are dead now, but my last grandparent died my senior year of high school, and 2 days after she had died, we had the most weird occurrences ever. And it could have been because, throwing religion in here, my grandmother was never really happy that my dad married someone who wasn't like a Church of Christ member. Like, my mom's Baptist and I'm Baptist, and my dad's Church of Christ, but he doesn't care what we are. He just lets us believe what sect of religion we want to. But we think she might have haunted my dad just because she didn't approve of his relationship, But anyway, moving on to what actually happened. She visited our house for only a day and haunted us. And the two occurrences that happened that my dad has actually seen with his own eyes, and she never really took a form, really. Just at most she was sort of like a foggy light. But that night she had caused a picture above my mom's head to fall and nearly struck her in the head. And while my dad was in the bathroom preparing for work, our clock fell and almost struck his foot. But the strange occurrence about her moving my clock off the wall and it breaking, it didn't actually break. Whenever it hit the floor, now say this is a clock where the glass is built on the inside of the frame, so if that clock is to break, the glass will shatter and the hands will get messed up. Well, whenever this clock fell, without the clock actually breaking, the glass fell out of the clock somehow and did not shatter, and the clock was perfectly intact. I don't really know how to explain that one. I guess there really is no explanation, but that clock, the glass popped out of it and came apart without anything of the clock actually breaking, so it was supernaturally disassembled, I guess. But that's the only haunting that happened with her.
That is strange. That it just popped out like that.
Yeah, and I still have the clock here, and I could show it to you in real life, but there's really no way the glass could have popped out without breaking, but somehow it did.
You think you could send me a picture of the clock for me to post up?
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show and sharing with us and everything.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody. I think that's all we've got for this episode. So thank you for tuning in, checking it out. Well, thank you, man. So, if you have any stories to share with us, if you would like to be a guest on the show, if you have any questions, or if there's a topic you would like to hear discussed on the show, you can reach me at thebeyond_pi@hotmail.com. All lowercase letters. Again, thebeyond_pi@hotmail.com. Or you can join my group on Facebook, The Beyond Paranormal Investigations. Good night, and thanks for listening, everybody.